Welcome back. Over the last couple of videos, we learned about work items. Especially in the last video, we learned about how to get started with backlogs, how backlogs are different from your work items. We added bunch of work item stories as well for our agile methodology. Then we went back and go ahead and looked at the boards wherein we saw how you could move your cards across the lane. We used the setting option wherein we color coded our tags and styled our cards so that we could visualize how things are moving across the board. Anybody who wants to have a look at it. In this video, we're going to be getting started with sprints and bunch of other cool features like swim lanes and adding few of the more columns into your board. So let's probably get started with adding columns. So how do you add columns into your board? So at the moment, what we have is we've got new, active, resolved, closed. I've added just before the video few more cards. You could see that there were not as many as these cards when we covered the backlog part. However, just to make sure that in general how your board's gonna look like, this is how it's gonna look like. It's gonna be full of stories and uh, be gonna be moving across different stages. Let's suppose you want one more column right over here. So what you could do is you could go right over here, go to columns, and you could see that there are four columns at the moment. You could add one more column, probably testing, just before the uh, closed, maybe before the resolve, and underneath the testing, you could always split them as well. So if you hit save, you would see that the testing has appeared right before the resolve, and you have got underneath also testing. You've got doing and done. You could always remove the splitting of them, or rather just have the testing. So once you've started testing a story, probably you could pick up one of the test file, maybe feature file. This is type of testing, so you're doing the feature file at the moment, then you want to move it to done, and once it is done you could move it in the next which is resolved again. So this is how you could manage the columns. There's something other thing which is called as swim lanes in Azure DevOps. So your board support, your Kanban supports the ability to visualize all of your stories, all of the tasks you are moving across different lanes. When you add swim lanes, when you use the swim lanes, you can visualize the status of your work that supports different service level classes. You can create swim lanes to represent the dimension that supports your work needs, and you could have different swim lanes, just like swimming pools, across these lanes. So how does that work? Let's suppose you go ahead and underneath the board you've got swim lanes, and you start adding the swim lanes, maybe something called as expedite, um, and you start adding one more, maybe something called as blocked, something as low priority. Let's probably save and close, and then you're gonna just at how that works. Now you would see that there are multiple swim lanes across your board: low priority, blocked, expedite, and these are type of swim lanes wherein you've got a high priority or a service class or a date driven task. You have got a login page. However, you want to make sure that the login page kind of is one of the, not low priority, but probably the priority, and you can move across the expedite board, and rest of the other stories are kind of are standard task, and they do not fall under expedite or blocked. Now there might be other tasks which are blocked at the moment. You could always move them, and if the activities of the this particular task were performed and now it has been moved from block to doing, you could always expedite in underneath the block. There are certain tasks which doesn't need to be that high priority, so you could always add them under the low priority. So this is how your uh, swim lanes work. You can always add these swim lanes to bifurcate your activities and some of the tasks which could be brought up to the priority, and make sure that you kind of uh, drag them into a lanes. So that's about swim lanes. I hope this was informative again, and you would be able to implement probably on a real life scenario as well. Let's move on to the sprint. So backlogs, so work items were anything and everything you want to track goes into the work item. Then we discovered what a backlog. Backlog is something which is like you could always prioritize which one you want to do first and which one is the least priority. Let's suppose shutdown server is the least priority and the testing of the story was the first one, and then this is how you could prioritize the story using the backlog. Then we discussed how you could see, visualize them, the movement of your stories. What are sprints? So in sprints, you time box your work items. You don't want to do it forever. You generally, these sprints are of 2 to 4 weeks. I have generally seen the sprints for 2 weeks, and within the 2 weeks, you ask the developers that these are the stories which we want to complete. You want to make sure that the CI/CD, just for the sake of example, make sure that this is done within the sprint, so that you could plan ahead and what should be done across other sprints. How do you do that? You go to the sprints and you got bunch of stories right over here. Sprint, start the sprint using the new sprint right over here. These are the by default one, and you could see the by default everything is going under the iteration one. So you could always go to the sprint and new sprint tab and give it a name, maybe August sprint 1. Give it a start date, probably starting from today for next 2 weeks, and goes into the location which is agile project, and hit create. Now you could add multiple sprint as well and start adding your, now we've got 11 work items over here. There are high chances you won't be able to complete all of the work items in a single sprint. So what you need to do is you could to move them onto different sprints. So probably you would like few of them to be done in August sprint, maybe like this. You could always move them, and move them to sprint like this, and you would see that the sprint work items have started to appear over here. And if you go to the August sprint, you would see that all of your sprint are coming right into the task board. You would be able to see how these kind of look like in the sprint, and you can add the underneath task of the sprint as well. So you could always add new task, that set up an agile training, decide whether a classroom or online, and then you could have multiple tasks for this particular story or feature, whatever you are developing. You could always go to the planning and see how your current sprint kind of looks like. The sprint starts today and it ends right after 2 weeks, and then you could always go ahead and uh, tweak few of the settings. What are the working days of your sprint? How do you want to see the backlogs? And you could always style your sprint as well. And then if you go to the planning kind of shows you what kind of how many hours you have got, uh, how many work items you're doing. You can always go to the column option and add bunch of new columns as well if needed. And if you go to the capacity is going to show you who all are working on the current sprint, so that you kind of plan that how many working hours are there and who is working on. So this folk has kind of has a capacity of 6 hours a day, and he has one day to off, probably on 13th. He wanna celebrate the weekend, the day before the weekend, and you could always visualize that, okay, I have got these many hours and these are the users who are available and are not available. If you go to the analytics kind of shows you the burn down chart, how many work items are completed, what's the average burn down, and items which are not estimated or estimated. This is how you could utilize sprints and could capacitize your work items or whatever work item you want to complete within a defined sprint. So generally you start off a sprint with a sprint planning. You kind of in the sprint planning you you get down with all the developers, infrastructure and testers, and decide what are obviously the the clients or the product owners and decide which all features or stories are relevant for this particular sprint basis on the business need, and you start pulling them into the current sprint and you time box them. You start pulling them from the backlog and time box them. Okay, for the next 2 weeks all of us gonna focus on these mini stories. Now these stories basically are epics and features which is going to be delivered to the end users, global users, and that's what we work toward. And once the sprint gets over, we sit down along with the same bunch of same audience, and then we kind of do a retro: what has gone well, what needs to improve, and what's working well. All right, that's about Sprint. I hope this was informative and you would be able to implement them on your sprints or whatever methodology you folks are using in your organization. That's it for now. I hope this was informative. I'll see you in a while.